And b'siyata d'shmaya, with the short time that we have, I wanted to jump into a teaching from the B'nei Yissaschar. It is a more well-known teaching, so if you have learned this already, it's good chazara. But it's so fundamental and it's so deep and it's so beautiful and sweet that I just had to share it with you. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this teaching about the Dreidel, which doesn't seem to be something that would be many teachings about, but paradoxically and interestingly enough, there is a lot of Torah on the Dreidel, and it's something that all of us have experienced this Hanukkah, will probably, B'nei Yissaschar, with children, grandchildren, and to be able to have a deeper experience of this child's game is something that's very beautiful and sweet indeed. So the tzaddik, the B'nei Yissaschar, was very connected to Hanukkah in and of his own life. We don't have time now to get into the whole thing, but the B'nei Yissaschar himself was in the middle of writing a sefer when he left the world called Derech Pikudecha, where the tzaddik went through all the different mitzvahs, starting from the beginning, Sefer HaChinuch, and he was outlining the machshava, dibor, and maisa that there is within every single mitzvah. So even mitzvahs that don't seem to have a dibor aspect, he was highlighting the way in which there's some element of dibor, and ultimately he got up to mitzvah 58, Ches Nun, Nun Ches, Chaim, Chanukah. And he himself was 58 years old at that point, and then he left the world. He was very connected, mushrish, to Chanukah, 58, of course, being the first two letters of the word Chanukah, the root of the word Chaim, Nun Ches. And so the tzaddik teaches us, and one of his most famous teachings about the Dreidel. And he begins the pasuk in the Yigash tells us, "As Yehuda shalach lefanav Yosef laharis lefanav goishna." The whole story that begins in this week's parsha, last week's parsha really, ultimately culminates in Yaakov Avinu coming down to Mitzrayim with his children and with their families. And Yaakov Avinu sends Yehuda before him, laharis lefanav goishna, to go with Yosef and to pave the way, so to speak, for them, all of the B'nei Yisrael at that time, to settle down in Goshen. Says the Heilig Tzaddik, Yesh Lizboinin Lama Shalach Lefanav, what was he sending him before his own journey for? Now, B'drashos Razal Yadua, Rashi brings a very interesting Rashi, a remez based on Chazal. Lefanav al Yosef lahayros lefanav, says Rashi, lahayros is an element, a reference to Torah. Torah is called hayra'ah. And so in a certain sense, Rashi tells us Yaakov was sending Yehuda to prepare Batei Medrash in Goshen, so that when they get there, they should have beautiful Makom Torah to learn. That's Chazal. But even lefi this understanding of Chazal, why did it have to be Yehuda? He could have sent Reuven, he could have sent Shimon, Levi, he could have sent any of the other Shvatim. And Gam Goishna, what's the remez here? There has to be some deeper allusion to the fact that the word that's used to describe the place where Yaakov Avinu was sending Yehuda was Goishna. Havalei Loimar li Goshen. The more natural way of saying it is that he sent Yehuda lefanav li Goshen. What's Goshna? Hagam shabamakam lamba betchila matel akasalav amehei b'seifa. So Rashi tells us in other places sometimes you do find that in order to point the way toward a place, you can have the letter hey at the end of the word in the place of a laman at the beginning of the word. But haloi davar hu im kol zeh time of boy haloi davar reku. There has to be some deeper meaning over here. So let's focus. It's a lot. I know it's just a little bit of text, but it's so big, this idea. So we're going to try this to get through it in a time-efficient manner. Says the Heilig Tzaddik, V'niretz known, Dihini adua de galus harishon galus mitzrayim, hayu b'davar sharshi l'chal adalid galus min dalid malchuyas. We know already it's a remez in the earliest place possible, right in the beginning of creation. Bereshis bar lekimas hashmayim v'aretz v'aretz hasasayu v'vayu v'chayshach al panei sahaim. And already the Medrash over there on the second pasuk in the Torah outlines the four galuyas that Am Yisrael are going to have to go through, hinted to it: Tayu, v'vayu, chayshach, and tahaim. These four are the references to all the galuyas you see. Even mushrish in the earliest dawn of creation, which is a big nechama to us, it's not like things went wrong. Things went wrong from our perspective. That yes, ideally we could have just had the first Beis Hamikdash. Even beyond that, we could have gone straight into Eretz Yisrael and been there forever. But ultimately, you see already encoded into the earliest shirashim of existence is that things are proceeding exactly the way that they were always going to proceed, in a certain very deep way. And ultimately, says the Medrash, very beautiful, the ruach alekim rachefes al panei hamayim, famously is a reference to the ruach of Mashiach. Right, that the whole pasuk tells us, "V'nachal of ruach Hashem, ruach chachma bina, ruach eitzuk v'ruach." It's all about ruach. So ruach elikim rachefes al panei hamayim is a reference to Mashiach that comes at the end. But there are 4 galuyos that are encapsulated in those 4 words and built into the fabric of existence. Galus Mitzrayim doesn't seem to be one of those 4. Right, so where does Galus Mitzrayim fit in? That was the primary Galus that Am Yisrael went to, but that's not one of the 4 Galuyos, which are Rome and Bavel, Yavan, Madai. Where's Mitzrayim? Says the Tzaddik, Mitzrayim is the Shoirish. Shar shilach al adal galuyos min adal malchuyos. It is the essence, it's the core. All the other experiences of Galus are outgrowths and roots that are sent forth from the seed of Galus Mitzrayim. Asher chbidu oilam al Yisrael, that all the world throughout Jewish history has been making it very difficult for Am Yisrael. Kol echad min adal malchuyos. Each of these 4 malchuyos, which of course, anytime we think about 4, we have to trace it back to the most essential first revelation of 4-ness, so to speak, which is the 4 letters of Yud, K, Vav, K, which represents Kedusha, which represents, of course, Achdus, which we're going to get to, Hashem, Echad, which means Yud, K, Vav, K. Even though there are 4 letters, paradoxically, they're Echad. They're absolutely bound together. And that means that any experience of manyness, which is captured, as we're going to see, in the basic concept of 4, which is 4 directions, and so you can only ever look in one place at once, and so that's really the essential emblematism of what separateness means, is that I can only ever face one direction. When I'm facing one direction, I'm not facing the others. Yud Ke Vav Ke, having 4 letters, represents this, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Achdus pervades all experiences of separateness. Right? That's what sits at the core of this. And so ultimately, each of these galuyos came to be mastir, came to conceal and to obscure one element of the way in which the oneness of Hashem is manifesting through this direction as well. So each galus came to hide Hashem's presence in one facet of existence. So it wasn't clear that all 4 directions were really flowing forth from one essential source, from Hashem, Yud Ke Vav Ke Echad. See, each of the malchuyos hayemenagala is echem and Hashem kiviyachal Hashem havaya baruchu. Each of these 4 galuyos came to oppose one of these facets. Asher Yisrael dveikim by, that Am Yisrael, of course, are davok, not in any of the 4 directions of this worldliness. Am Yisrael are davok where? In the shirish. As it says, right? As the pasuk says, "Va'atem hadveikim," meaning you, Am Yisrael, are connected not to any of these 4 directionalities of this world, but b'havaya lekechem. You're connected to the spiritual essence that pervades all the other facets of existence. So where does Galus Mitzrayim fall in? So it's Yadua. We don't have time now to get into the details of it, but it's Yadua that you're right. Although there are 4 letters of Yud Ke Vav Ke, there are actually 5 elements of Yud Ke Vav Ke. Where's the 5th element? Of the name Yud Ke Vav Ke. Maybe the center point. Another element. The Svarim explain that the letter Yud is a letter in and of itself, but it begins with what's called the Kutzai Shel Yud, the crown on top of the letter, the place where the Sofer really begins to write every letter from. But in the letter Yud, it has this sharp little thorn on top that's called the Kitzai, or the Kutzai, like the thorn on top of the Yud. And in Kabbalah and Chassidus, it's a very, very, very high element. We don't usually even speak about it. For example, we speak about Arba Olamais, for those who are familiar a little bit with the Svar Makdash, Matzilus, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, but there's actually a 5th element. It's called Adam Kadmon. But we don't really speak about that, generally speaking. It's beyond this world, so much so that it's not even a letter, right? The letters are the basic elements of comprehensibility. Once you have a letter, okay, you have something you can pronounce, you can look at, you can analyze. The Kutzah Shel Yud is not even a letter. You understand that it's nothing. It's not in this world. It's the earliest ray of something developing from nothingness. It's not yet a letter. It's not concretized in a form that we can look at and analyze. Says the B'nei Yissaschar, Galus Mitzrayim is connected that element, the Kutzah, the Ois Yud, the essence, the shoirish of all the letters of the Yud Ke Vav Ke that are a reference to the other 4 Malchuyos. Galus Mitzrayim is the shoirish of it, is the Kutzah, the Ois Yud. Menagid l'bechina el yoina. It comes to oppose that very elevated element who Kitzai Shel Yud, he calls it the Kitzai Shel Yud over here, The thorn, the point atop the Yud Shu Shoirish Ladal Oisias Havai Kanoida, as is known, is the source and the essence for all the other letters. Zeh side, unbelievable. He brings a side in the pasuk where it says that the B'nei Mitzrayim were disgusted with Am Yisrael. What's the lashon that's used? Vayakitzu mipnei B'nei Yisrael. They were disgusted. Says the B'nei Yissaschar remez. Vayakitzu means to be disgusted by, but he says it's a reference to the kutza the Oisiyah. It's unbelievable, right? The kitzu vayakitzu mipnei B'nei Yisrael. That's where Mitzrayim is rooted in the kutza the Oisiyah. Okay. Came therefore Galus Mitzrayim galuyos. So that means that Galus Mitzrayim contains all of the other exiles. Really, Chazal say this in the Medrash that says that Mitzrayim was called Mitzrayim. All the galuyos are called Al Shem Mitzrayim because they're Mitzayrim li Yisrael. That's an experience that we had throughout our history. It wasn't just Mitzrayim like Egypt. They were all painful. So really, the Medrash already tells us this. But he says another beautiful remes from the Begalei Amukas. It says over there in the very beginning of the Galus, of the Shibud, it says, Vayehi bayamim harabim. And it was in those great many days, and Am Yisrael are proliferating, and Pari is getting nervous, and he begins to try to go ahead and to begin to enslave Am Yisrael. Kamavur Megala Amukas, the Megala Amukas brings a remez. That word rabim, which could be a remez in many different psukim as well, but like Mayim Rabim. But over here, Rabim is Rosh Tevis, the four Galuyos. Roimi is the Reish, Beis is Bavel, the Yud is Yavan, and the Mem is Madai. So right in the beginning, what's that? Madai, Parasa Madai is Haman, right? So you see over here, then in the beginning of the expression of Galus Mitzrayim is already hinted, all the four Galuyos, Vayakitzu Mipnei B'nei Yisrael, the Kutza the Ois Yud, that is menagid to the four different letters of Yud Kevav Kevihine. But ultimately, when Galus Mitzrayim is taken down, Yiplu Anafin. If you cut down a tree from the trunk, all the leaves and the branches are falling as well. Memela. Came therefore Hu Sam Yisoid Musar B'Toraseno HaKadoshah. Therefore, it's very, very important, and again and again and again, so many different mitzvahs are there as a zecher for Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why is it so important? Many different experiences Am Yisrael had throughout history. Why do we have to constantly remember in Kiddush and in Kriyashim every day? Zichron Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because if we can combat that essential experience of Galus Mitzrayim, then we're okay in all the Galuyos. That all this is really based on the Gur Aryeh, the Maral, says that if you really take the human being, distill the person down into separate functional layers and strata of their existence, you're going to find four fundamental layers. Number one is koyach gufani. It's just literally the physical element, the structural form of the person. Flesh, blood, bones. Koyach gufani. Then you have koyach nafshi, which is the base, lowly, elemental, animalistic life force. Ki adam hu nefesh, just flowing through the human being, keeping the person animated and alive. That's stage two. Then you have koyach sichli, the capacity for the human being to transcend the animalistic focus just on the moment and to think bigger. Consciousness. And then koyach elyon, hakoilel kulam, there's the essence of the human spirit that really encompasses all of this, the DNA encoded within every level of that human experience that makes this thing a human, that makes this flesh human flesh and not cow flesh, and that makes this life force human life force and not an animal life force, that makes the seichel human seichel. There's a koyach elyon that's koilel hakol. Hakol. Says the Maral that all of the different galuyos are also coming to come against one aspect of this Adam that Chazal tells us, the Gemara Ksubis, Atem kriyam Adam, loy umas Adam kriyam Adam. There's something about Am Yisrael that we're called Adam. And so all the galuyos, all the experiences of exile and persecution that our nation has been subjected to throughout the years is coming to oppose one element of what it is to be human. How does this work? He lays it out very beautifully. The first Galus Bavel, destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, was coming to oppose the koyach hanafshi, our nefesh, Where does he get that from? They came against the Beis HaMikdash, and the essence of the Beis HaMikdash was karbanos. Hainu karbanos. The karbanos were there to rectify our animalistic element, right? We take the behema instead of us, so to speak. We're elevating bahamius. That's the whole concept of a karban. As the pasuk says, "V'nefesh ki sakriv." Mikem, karban Hashem. The nefesh ki sakriv. So we see that there's a deep connection between the nefesh and karbanis. Wow, they came, the Bablim, and they destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash. What were they coming to oppose? The koyach hanafshi. Madai, Haman, Achashverish. Hayemenagid l'koyach. What will you say? Which koyach? Gufani. They came literally to destroy the guf of Am Yisrael. So they came opposed to the guf of Am Yisrael. Yavan, which we're learning about now during the days of Chanukah and celebrating our victory over this force. Yavan, everybody knows. Yavan came to oppose the Seichel. Which is our Heilige Torah, Ikra Chachma, which is the primary form of Chachma, the deepest way. Hamayasheres HaSeichel, that clarifies, that straightens a person's mind. They wanted to come and they wanted to corrupt our deep understanding of what Chachma really means, as the Svarim tell us, the Tanya and others really earlier. Chachma is the Oisias Koyach Ma. And that's what our Chachma of Torah is. Koyach ma, to come to realize we don't really know anything. That's what Chachma is for. That's what the Chachma of Torah means, to come to bring us into an awareness that however much we think we know, ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. What did the Greeks want to say? Punkt vaker. They wanted to come with a big Chachma that the human brain is able to understand everything. And to make the human being the center of his universe, instead of recognizing that that we're just creations, we're just here on a mission. It's not for us and our own personal grandeur. It's for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mission for all of humanity, v'chulei. Right, so our Chachma is literally the contrast to the Chachma philosophies of Yavan. And finally, Malchus Aravias. This is really, really scary, because it's our galus that we're all in, which, by the way, going back to the medrash that we mentioned, where Va'aretz hasayu v'vayu v'choshech al pnei sahaim. It's very incredible, because this medrash was written thousands of years ago, 1,000 plus years ago, where you have this incredible thing, where all the other galuyos that are referenced in these words in the second pasuk of Bereshis, tayu, vayu, chayshech, there's some content there. Even though tayu, it's like confounded, but there's still an existing context, right? Things are all mixed up. Bayhu, things are like, where is everything? Everything's out of place. Chayshech is darkness. Tahaim is just like this empty, vacant void. And that's our gullus now, is the gullus of Tahaim. It's this deep emptiness. There's nothingness anymore. We call it postmodernism. There's nothing even to hold on to. There aren't even bad ideas. There are just no ideas. You see what's happening in the world. People don't think anymore. There's nothing. It's just a Tahaim. And that's what we're experiencing now. And says the B'nei Yissaschar, based on everything we're saying and based on the Maral, the Malchus Haravias, he Hamedake v'ramas hakoila. It's a pasuk in Daniel. It is the most destructive of all. V'hi hamenagedes lenefesh hakoileles. It comes to oppose the whole thing, every level, the guf and the nefesh and the seichel, everything. Ha'elyoina hasher hi koileles kol hakoichos v'hi mechabrim oisam al. Right, al kein malcha and mecharev oisam and v'hi. Mechaberes, thank you. And he comes to include all of them and oppose them all. Al kain, therefore, Malchus Revius, Misnagedes, Leguf, Lenefesh, Leseichel, Hara'u lanu mikol Malchei Ha'adama. And it's the worst experience that we've ever had in a certain sense. Al Yisrael. And so all of them come to oppose Am Yisrael, Ratzam Levatala Achdus, like we mentioned earlier. Am Yisrael's whole thing is what? We're rooted where? In the Achdus of it all. Where the four other facets which come to conceal one letter of Yud Kei Vav Kei, to make us live in a world where we forget that everything is all wrapped up in the Echad Yachad Umiyuchad. Ve'im HaGarmim She'ein Yichud V'Achdusai Yizbarach. B'iskalus, it prevents HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity from being revealed l'chol b'ay olam to the whole world. The Yisrael goy echad adveikim ba'achdos k'madat Amar, like we said, Am Yisrael are connected to achdos va'atem adveikim ba'avaya l'keichem chayim kulchem ayayim. We're connected to the Yud Kei Vav Kei, where all different elements that are mishtalshal down into our world become 4 directions, become 4 levels of existence: inanimate, plant life, animal, human, become the 4 elements of which everything is created, etc., is all wrapped up in Achdus. It's all a manifestation of Hashem. Einoid Movada. Al Kain HaMalchuyos Heim HaArba. Therefore, the 4 Malchuyos that come to be mastir this reality, to hide this reality, splinter into 4. Shehem and Bechinas Alma de Peruda. They come to take that unity and to force us into an experience where we forget and we live in this world as if, chas v'shalom, everything is separate. Pirud la'arba ksavos. V'zeh shekasa amar kasav v'yiru yoshvei ksavos me'oisai secha. Very deep remez in a pasuk in Tehillim, where it says that the people would tremble. Yoshvei ksavos, those who live on the edges of the world, would tremble me'oisai secha, Hashem, from your great signs, from your manifestation in the world. So he says, where do you get v'yiru yoshvei ksavos? That people who live in the edges are trembling. What's the root of why someone would tremble in some edge somewhere, disconnected from the others? Says the pasuk in Tehillim, Me oisai secha, a reference to the oisios of Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's where edges come from. That's where the 4 malchuyos, the 4 directions, ksavos. If you're in one corner, you're not in the next corner. It's all nishtalshel chas v'shalom, Me oisai secha, from the concealment of the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Yisrael him nekudas emtsois, but Am Yisrael are that essential point in the middle. Ukvar yadata, and it's already known. Bechinas ha'emtza ma'achas. The middle point unifies all the other sides. And when all the malchuyos are in his battle and they're nullified, yashav hakol and nekudas ha'achdus, everything will come back to that center point. The whole world will come to one language, yachad, together, likrei kulam b'shem havaya. There won't be any distinctions anymore. There won't be this lower, constricted level of consciousness where people aren't recognizing the essential unity of all of experience. And Hashem will be the melech on the whole world. Everything will be under the dominion of the nation that was only ever under the dominion of the oneness of everything. For them, it's for them to be the ones that unify the world, because they were always ever throughout history connected to the force that is the essential unifying factor within every experience of separateness. Venerally, wish we had more time. We're going to try to pack this in. It's a big idea. Venerally, She'al Kein Malchus Yisrael min Yehuda. That's why Malchus Yisrael comes from Yehuda. That what's the letters Yehuda? Sheyesh b'shmoi oisius Hashem havaya echad. The name Yehuda is the letters Yud Kei Vav Kei, but there's one extra letter there. Dalid. What does that show you? That Yehuda is mamtik. Yehuda sweetens the 4-ness of the 4 galuyos with the letters Yud Kei Vav Kei at the shirish. That's the Malchus Yehuda. It's sweetening the experience of 4-ness that's nishtalshal from the achdos of the 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Ki Malchus Yisrael ma'achedes bepirsum l'chol b'y olam achdos Hashem ha'miyuchad u'mekareves u'ma'achedes ha'pirit sayid alma de piruda, unifies this experience of separateness. Try to get through this very quickly now. Very, very deep idea. Really, it takes much longer, but we're just going to give it to you in a nutshell. How will the Geula unfold? Through 2 Mashiachim. Mashiach ben Yosef and then Mashiach ben David. First it will be through Yosef. Very, very, very basically, so we don't have time now. Very basically, Malchus Yehuda is possibly the experience of the separateness of Olam Hazeh. Yosef HaTzadik is an R. It's connected to the concept of Tzadik. Again, all this is very, very deep. It's the light of unity that is able, when it connects to the light of this worldliness, to demonstrate that this whole world is also rooted in oneness. It's a proliferation within the world of separateness of a spirit of achdus. That's the yichud between Yosef, and David is called in the deeper Svarim Yesod and Malchus. I don't have time to get into that whole thing now. Yesod and Malchus, and that's Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. Habam Yehuda, V'tikain biyadi amalucha v'tayim Rabbi Isbeisai, and this is the deep secret of Smichas Geula l'Tefila. Yosef is connected to Geula, Yehuda is connected to Tefila. That's why it's so important to be Soymich Geula l'Tefila, not to make a period between them, because that's the Yichud Gamor. Hu ha-Yichud ha-Gamor. V'al yedei zeh yashiv la'achdas kol anafradim v'hoya Hashem echad v'Yisrael am kroi v'goy echad. Now, ubezet haskell v'tav, and here we come to the end. We can come to understand Maskalas Hagalas Hashrashi is that as Galus Mitzrayim is beginning. Kasher Bayaka Mitzrayim, this is it. They're going down to Mitzrayim. They're not going to leave there only after a very long period of time. V'rashu Galus Sharshis L'Kol Adal Galuyos. Yaakov Avinu sees that Mitzrayim is connected to Kutzada Is Yud Ve'Yakitzu B'nei Yisrael. Hine, what does he do? As Yehuda Shalach Lefanav El Yosef. He sends Yehuda Daika to Yosef, Kaniskala El Beis Meshichin, which is already preparing the Geula of all the Galuyos. Yehuda Mashiach ben David to Yosef Mashiach ben Yosef. Lahiris Lafanav, Hainu Shiur HaDerech Lafanav, Hainu L'Kol Yisrael HaKlulam Oiv Nekrayim Al Shema Yisrael, in order to go ahead and to show the path. That's what it means, Lahiris Lafanav, for all of Am Yisrael throughout the Dairos. Where does he send them? Goishna. He sends them to Goshen. This is a reference to all the Daled Malchuyos Hashem B'Sitra Achra that are the other side Menagden La'arba Koichos that come to contrast and come to conceal the four elements of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is Achdus Hashem B'Kedushas Yisrael B'Soy Nefshoy Seihem, where we're connected to V'nei Goishna is Rosh Hashanah, Gufani, Sichli, Nafshi, and Hakol. These four elements of the human being that all the Galuyos seek to contrast. He sends them Goishna. Who does he send? Yosef, Yehuda. Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. Hainu Malchus Revius HaKalelas Kulam Hi Negdias LaNefesh HaKoilel. And that's where he sends them. Don't have time to read the rest inside. I'm just going to give it to you very quickly and then we'll see the last paragraph. Says the B'nei Yissaschar, guess what? This word Goishna, that's a reference to the Rosh Hashanah of Gufani, Sichli, Nafshi, and Hakol, is Gematria Mashiach. It is Gematria Mashiach, because this is what Mashiach comes to be Misakin. It's also Gematria Nachash, because it comes to contrast against that force, the Nachash, which is the source of all of this otherness, to come to convince Adam Rishon, Atam Kriyam Adam, to disalign himself from the Achdus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to seek some will of his own. Alma de Piruda, where there's separateness between our will and the will of the Creator. It's also, this is fascinating, Gematria, Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, and Hashem Himlech. It's the same gematria of Goishna, of Mashiach. All of this throughout history, this is the great struggle that's happening. The last minute, let's take a look at the last piece, which is about the Dreidel Haggah. And he brings in a little bit of a note, and again, this is very famous, but just to review. Now we could understand the minig, which he calls Torah, minig aveseinu Torah, asher minig b'mei Chanukah. That on Chanukah, which is called Chanukah, as he says in other places, miloshen chinuch, it's a preparation of the world to come. It's teaching us how to get ready to live with the light of Geula. They play with this four-sided piece of wood, and on all of its four sides, what letters are written? Nun, Gimel, Hey, Shin, which are the same letters as Goishna, which are the same Rosh Hashanah as Gufani, Sichli, Nafshi, and the Koich of Hakol. Where are these letters written? On the four sides, the four ksavos, separateness, disconnected from the essential point, hinting to the four galuyas that come to conceal the four letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, where everything is unified. Bepered, they're all separate. One letter doesn't see the next letter, they're all separate. But where does the whole thing spin? It all spins on one little point on the bottom. One little central nekuda, lahayris, to teach shamalchuyos halalu, that all of these four malchuyos hamarumazim that are hinted to b'tevas goishna, like we learned, nun gimel heishin, which really stands for Nes Gadol Hayasham, but over here we see stands for something much deeper. Kanal hamanagdim b'perudam b'ksavos, where they're concealing the oneness. Hinekulam soivivim ala merkaz. They're all there because they're revolving around that central point. They're all trying to conceal that element where everything is one at its shirish. Nekudas ha'emsa'is Yisrael, which is Am Yisrael, Ham'achdim aksavos, who unify all these four elements that come down to that one point. Al-Kain aksavos soyvivim, it should say soyvivim, al-Americas, they all surround that central point, v'kulam yizbatlu al-Americas. And when they spin, you can't even see the letters anymore. They're all nullified. It's one word. It's you don't even see four sides when you spin the dreidel, because when they're all surrounding that central point, the four sides are nullified within the great light of Yud Kei Vav Kei. And Hanukkah is a little bit of a taste of what will be in the end of time, when the whole entire nations, all the nations, will change to one language, meaning they'll talk about one thing, Yachad, Likrei Kulam B'Shem Havaya, to stop with the ksavos and the separateness and this worldliness, but to be able to access the unified spirituality that pervades everything. Then the Nachash, which again is the same gematria of Goishna, which is gematria Goishna as Havaya Melech, Havaya Malach, Havaya Yimloich, also gematria Goishna, and Mashiach and Nachash, v'zeh bebias Mashiach tzidkeinu b'meher b'yameinu. Amen. So something much deeper to think about tonight when you play with the dreidel. It's a whole different understanding. Ashreinu, thank you so much.